Today I'm going to show you how to make some do-it-yourself cribbage board pegs. These are pretty easy to make and you might already have some of the stuff that you need for them laying around the house. So let's go over the stuff that we're going to need in order to get this done. Starting with some 6-gauge copper stranded wire. You can buy this by the foot at like Home Depot if you don't have any. I'm using some small gauge solder and a propane torch. As well as a belt sander. I'm using a 1-inch belt sander with 80 grit sandpaper. If you have a belt sander, it will make this whole process a heck of a lot easier. So we want to start by taking, I have maybe like an 8-inch piece of copper wire, or maybe like about a foot of copper wire. And I've stripped off, a good 6 inches or so of the shielding. And then I just clamped it here in this bench vise. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to fire up the propane torch and I'm just going to start heating the whole end of this. Probably like the last, 2 or 3 inches or so. I'm going to start heating it. And you want to get that copper nice and hot. And after you get that copper all hot, you can now start laying in solder. And you can see this small gauge solder goes really nicely down into those grooves in between the copper strands. So continue heating and soldering until you have, maybe about a little over 2 inches towards the end. It depends how long you want to make your cribbage board pegs, but about 2 inches or so is what I'm doing here. And after I do one side, I'm going to rotate that copper wire to the opposite side so that I can make sure I can get some solder laid in over there. So I'm firing the torch back up. Again, just doesn't take very long at all. You just have to drop a little heat on there and then start laying in some of this this solder into those grooves. Now the other thing you want to pay particular attention to is try to get as much solder as you can in the very end. So really double check the very tip and make sure that the end of the wire has plenty of solder in there. And once you have this thing all soldered in to your liking, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. You can put as much or as little solder as you like. You just need enough to hold the strands together. But once we're done, we can move over to the belt sander. Now moving over to the belt sander, before I cut this thing to length, I'm going to start sanding. And you can see I'm just continuously spinning the copper around and around and around. And I'm obviously sanding more off towards the tip than I am on the other part. Now, sometimes you'll split it apart. Now here this is again in slow motion. You can see a piece of that copper split apart when I was sanding the tip. And that's okay. It's not hard to fix. So I'll show you quickly how to do that. You simply want to take some pliers or your cutters and go ahead and crimp that back in place so that the copper is pressed back in where it's supposed to be. Go ahead and fire up your torch. So get that fired up, heat the end of that, get it nice and hot. As long as it's nice and hot, you can set the torch down, throw a little extra solder in there, and then you can just turn around and go right back to sanding when you're done. So that's really easy to fix if it does split apart. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So continue sanding and test fit the peg to make sure that the tip will fit in your cribbage board okay. And continue sanding until it looks about how you would like and that it fits in your cribbage board. Now when you're done, you can then cut these things to length. Now obviously you can cut this whatever length you feel like. I did mine, roughly 2 inches long or so, which I thought was a cool length for these. Now after you cut it, it may be that you need to solder those a bit, but if you have enough solder in there already, it should be fine. So go ahead and just carefully sand off and round off those ends, or the end away from the peg hole end. And then once you're done sanding that all down, that's it. These things are done. They're totally usable. Now, if you want, you can add a little bit of color to them. I had my kids paint these in pairs with some nail polish, which actually worked out pretty good. So you could have some different colors. But there you are. Simple way to take some copper wire and make some fun do-it-yourself cribbage board pegs. Anyway, thanks so much for watching and have a great day.